Hello there everyone, today we are ranking every Zonai device in Tears of the Kingdom. I know it's been done before, but you guys voted on it, and I'm assuming it'll be different from Rapid Luigi's. Funny how both of us have Luigi in our YouTube names. Anyway, I'll be ranking the devices based mostly on usefulness and versatility, since that's their main purpose. With that said, let's get into it. In last is the light. It does nothing. It lights up a tiny area and costs a good amount of battery. If attached to a weapon, it does almost nothing. And if attached to a shield, it can light up the area, but the cost of a lot of shield durability. What's worse is that the bright bloom seeds are much better at lighting up an area, at no cost other than a single seed. If attached to a vehicle in the depths, it can be useful, but bright bloom seeds are just better. And the light wastes power that could be used in traversing. It's not like bright bloom seeds are rare as well. They're more common than lights and device dispensers. There's just no reason to use this. 26. The Hydrant. This thing is also nearly useless, but it's at least somewhat necessary in the fire temple. It can put out fire, can create rock slabs and lava, and outside of this, it can be used to get enemies wet. I mean moisten them to the point where they conduct electricity and become a safety hazard. However, the water can't do anything on its own, making it pretty bad, but better than the light because it can actually be used. This might come as a shock, but portable pots aren't that useful. There are very few circumstances where you absolutely need to cook a dish, as there will usually be a cooking pot or at a stable or town nearby. It has no special vehicle functionality outside of being able to recharge your battery mid-flight, which is situational. It can be helpful in earlier game when you don't have weather-resistant armor, but it quickly becomes pretty useless. 24. The Mirror. This is only used in the Lightning Temple, but it has some really good puzzles in it. Outside of the puzzles, it can be used in combat to stun enemies, but only during daytime. It's not too useful though, so it lands itself down here. Maybe if it could reflect magical attacks like previous mirror shields, it would be better. 23. The Battery. I don't want to put this one this far down, but it isn't practical unless you don't have any battery upgrades. My main issue is that they cost extra Zonai in auto build and have quite a bit of weight. Take the hover bike. It uses a lot of power, but you can't attach batteries to it since it'll weigh down the bike and make it fly a lot worse. It also uses up the build limit, so it can't be used in more elaborate builds. It also doesn't hold that much battery, as it only has like 2 bars, so it runs out super quickly. Overall, the cons just outweigh the pros. 22. The Stake. The main thing people use this device for is as a vehicle jack. It can be placed in any solid surface, and it won't move unless the player ultra hands it. It's really only good in certain puzzles and vehicle creation. Outside of this, it has no special properties, putting it low on this list. 21. The Cart. It's good in the early game for crappy vehicles, but its main issue is being unable to move over bumpy terrain. Becomes very apparent very quickly. It will easily flip over on tiny hills, glide away if you get off, and leaves you extremely vulnerable to attacks. And if you did put on walls, it makes the cart way more likely to flip. They're good early game before you get wheels, but after that they become useless. The Sled is like the cart, but it can't be used on solid terrain. It is mostly used on snow and sand, where it moves extremely fast, and is a great way to move around these areas of the game. Outside of this, I made a car out of sleds. The design at the bottom looked cool, so naturally I built an effing car. There isn't too much to say, it's pretty interchangeable with the cart. 19. Balloon. The biggest issue is that it disappears after a while, which holds back this item and another item on this list. This mechanic is so stupid and nobody likes it. It turned what could have been an interesting device into something kind of worthless. You need fire to make it fly. This is best done with a torch, but you could also use a flame emitter. Once you get a source of fire, it goes up at the speed of smell and you can get to some high places. The issue is that you need to attach a platform since the balloon doesn't come with one, and you need the fire, which might be hard if you don't have a torch. It's unfortunate that it rises so slowly as it disappears before you can get too much height. It's an okay Zonai device. 18. Big battery. This would have been near the bottom of the list if it weren't for this. Outside of the launch, the big battery is like the battery, but you can't get it from device dispensers. You can only get them through buying them with crystallized charges, or in certain shrines. Unfortunately, they cost extra Zonite, weigh a lot more, and take up a lot more space, making them not super useful. 17. Stabilizer. This device can be useful in creating catapults, and stabilizing things. But it is extremely niche, and almost too good at its job. If attached to, say, a motorcycle, the motorcycle will be completely flat, and it won't be able to tilt up or down to go on hills. It is very good when you need to keep stuff upright though, so I think it deserves a spot up here. 16. Time Bomb. These things do not replace remote bombs. They have a giant blast radius and explode about 5 seconds after you activate them. If shot from a multi-shot bow, you can get a ton of time bombs in one place, and it is extremely useful in combat. You can attach one to a shield and get a bounce off of it as well. Its main weakness is that you can't change the timer, and it always seems to hit me. I think they're just outclassed by the much more common bomb flower. 15. Flame emitter. It's the worst emitter most because the fire isn't as damaging as the others. However, it is great at killing enemies. The issue I have is that the enemies run away from the fire very quickly, and I don't think you can trap them in the fire infinitely. Outside of this, it costs a ton of battery, but at least it can do a ton of damage, and it looks awesome. But like other fire-based weapons, it's mostly style with little substance. Unless you create a grass fire, in which is a ton of damage. 14. Small wheel. It can create some fun cars to drive around in. I personally made a 6-wheeled armored truck out of them, but it can't handle rough terrain or turn very well. I just find the handling extremely wonky. It seems to not turn and then turn way too much and drift into a wall. I wish there's a way to brake the vehicle as well while not turning off the turrets or other devices attached to the vehicle. It's a pretty nice item to have since it makes some extremely fast vehicles. It's even faster than the big wheel. It's just every device above it is better. 13. Spring. The spring is a fun item. It's a shame that you can only use it once on a shield. Its best use is to cross gaps, and with a stabilizer you can more easily get angled launches on flat ground. You can stack springs to get super springs, and I may have gone a bit overboard with this one. There are really no issues with it other than the shield thing. It doesn't even cost power. Big wheel. A slower, all-terrain wheel. While being able to roll over basically anything, my favorite use for it is to attach stuff to it and make it spin. The extra functionality can make so many fun things like orbital strike cannons. It's just such a fun thing to mess around with. 11. Homing cart. A sort of base for other devices, the homing cart will track enemies and attempt to bump into them. You can then attach stuff to it, and if you have the right combinations, your enemies will be destroyed. The base cart itself isn't that useful, but you can create some pretty fun drones with it. 10. Concert head. Another base for other devices, but this one can be attached to vehicles as turrets. You can also create many weapons of mass destruction with it, since it will home in on enemies. If attached to anything, you basically get a support turret that will shoot anything it sees. It's useless on its own, but it can be used in many creative ways. 9. Shock emitter. It can be used to infinitely stun an enemy to death. This thing is deadly. I mostly use them as spikes on a vehicle, and then try to run everything over. It's a lot of fun. One weakness it does have is that it has no range. If it wasn't a melee weapon, it could easily be the best device in the game, but the lack of range just really brings down what is an amazing device. 8. Wing. It suffers from the issue that it disappears way too quickly. I get it would be too OP if you could have a permanent plane, but this was just not the way to go. It becomes useless once you have enough battery for the hover bike, since it can't go far enough to justify the cost needed to pilot it. I think that naturally spawning wings shouldn't despawn. That way they'd have a lot more value, and the player-made ones wouldn't be stupidly broken. As it stands, it's a fun item that is great early game, but falls off way too quickly because of the despawn timer. 7. Cannon. I love this item. It is so cool and creates tons of explosions. I just wish the cannon shots did more damage. They're like the bomb barrels. They're great early game since they do so much damage against weaker enemies, but once you begin scaling, the cannon does little more than toss them around. Against certain enemies, it barely does anything. However, the fun factor of blowing up an entire group of bokoblins will never get old to me, placing them all the way up here. 6. Fan. I did not expect the fan to be this high, but it's just so versatile, and it can be used in hover bikes, planes, cartmobiles, you name it. It can even create a discount Rivali's Gale, and attached to a shield, it can do this. It's such a versatile device that can do so much. 5. Steering stick. Alright, now we get to the core of the Zonai devices. If it weren't for this, most Zonai devices would just go in the direction they were facing, and not be useful in vehicles. The steering stick single-handedly makes Zonai vehicles possible, and fun to use. Well, basic on its own, it does so much for Zonai devices, it needs to be up here. 4. Frost emitter. It can be used to shred a single enemy. When you shatter a frozen enemy, the enemy takes 3 times as much damage, and the frost emitter can basically keep an enemy stuck forever, and save your weapons some much valuable durability. It also has some insane range, so no worries about getting too close to an enemy. Just be careful and try not to freeze yourself. 3. Hoverstone. The Hoverstone chooses the Addison sign puzzle so badly it's not even funny. I went for every sign, and it would have taken twice as long were it not for the Hoverstone. Outside of that, it can be used to create an emergency platform if you shoot it with an arrow. And it can create some pretty cool space stations. And it can hold up even the largest of devices, almost like an aerial stabilizer. It's just so useful. 2. Rocket. Rocket shields are so damn OP. You can use them to gain an absurd amount of height, a ton of horizontal speed, or stick it to something and watch it team rocket away. Rocket arrows also exist, and they deal a crapload of damage, and have insane speed and distance. The only issue is the time limit, but it's actually pretty long, so you can get pretty high with some of these. There's just so many fun ways to use it. But one device beats it, and that device is the beam emitter. You know how I said the cannon doesn't scale into the late game? Well, beam emitters can. The best part is that the damage stacks, so if you have something like this, you can shred enemies with a laser grill. It's also relatively safe to link since only one beam can hit him at a time, and it gets invincibility frames. The lasers also look awesome, and you can do some cool looking builds with them. It's not particularly good as weapon fuses, since only one beam emitter is quite weak, but it's got style, plus the damage potential puts it all the way up here. So what did you think of this ranking? Leave a comment below with your thoughts and opinions. If you have any other video suggestions, leave them down below. I hope you enjoyed and have a great day, and see you guys next time.